The heavy iron gate shuddered under the force of tiny fists pounding against it. In the silence of the early morning hours, bang, 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 the sound echoed, through the courtyard of a secluded estate on the outskirts of Naples. It was past midnight, and a small figure stood determined on the other side of the gate, barely illuminated by the cold glow of a single street lamp. Inside the sprawling villa, Dante Costa snapped awake to the frantic alerts from his security system. A motion sensor had been triggered at the front gate. Half asleep but instantly alert, Dante rolled out of his king-sized bed and grabbed the handgun from his nightstand. Years of living as the most feared Mafia boss in the city had conditioned him to expect trouble at any hour. With a frown creasing his sharp features, he strode barefoot across the dark marble floor to a panel on the wall that housed several CCTV monitors. He jabbed the key for the front gate camera. The grainy night vision feed blinked to life, revealing an unexpected sight. A child, alone, standing outside his gate. The boy couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. He looked tiny against the iron bars, his mop of dark hair messy and his small hands gripping the metal as he shook it with surprising ferocity. Dante watched as one of his guards approached the child, a massive man in a black suit practically double the width and 4 times the weight of the little intruder. The boy shouted something. No, he screamed it at the guard, but the CCTV had no audio. Dante narrowed his eyes. The child was clearly upset, yelling with all his might, though Dante couldn't make out the words. The guard seemed to be trying to shoo him away, a large palm gesturing dismissively, but the boy refused to budge. Instead, the kid shoved his arm through the bars and actually grabbed the guard's jacket lapel from inside the gate. Dante's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Che diavolo," he murmured under his breath, meaning what the hell? On the monitor, the guard was flustered now. Dante recognized him as Marco, a reliable and usually unflappable man. Marco tried prying the boy's fingers off his suit, clearly unsure how rough he could be with a child. The boy clung like a pit bull, legs braced apart, face red with either anger or tears, perhaps both. Dante's chest tightened at the sight. Something about the child's desperation was unsettling, but also strangely compelling. Dante's finger hovered over the intercom button. Protocol was to scare off trespassers, even little ones. But this situation was far from ordinary. How had a young child gotten out on the streets of Naples at this hour alone? And why on earth was he at Dante Costa's heavily guarded estate gate in the dead of night? No child in their right mind would do that, unless it was a matter of life or death. He pressed the intercom. "Basta." Dante's low voice crackled through the speaker by the gate. "Marco, bring him to me." His words were calm but authoritative, the kind of tone that demanded immediate compliance. On the screen, Marco looked up in surprise at the camera, then gave a curt nod. He carefully disengaged the boy's fingers from his jacket. The child resisted at first, struggling like a wild cat. But as soon as Marco said something, likely telling him that the boss agreed to see him, the fight drained out of the boy. The guard opened the gate just enough to let the child squeeze through. Dante watched the boy march forward. Chin jutted out stubbornly even as he swayed on his feet. The kid looked ready to collapse. Dante could see the tremor in the small shoulders, and the way the boy blinked hard, as if fighting tears or exhaustion. Dante felt a tug in his chest he hadn't felt in years, a pang of concern that was distinctly personal. He straightened and pulled on a black t-shirt over his bare torso, tucking the gun at the back of his waistband. Within moments, the boy would be at his door. Dante paused, then quietly opened a locked drawer in a console by the wall and slipped out a sleek dagger, sheathing it at his ankle. Old habits. Even if this child posed no threat, Dante hadn't survived this long by being careless. And if someone had sent a child as a distraction or a trap, they would regret it. Downstairs, he disarmed the alarm and opened the heavy oak door just as Marco led the boy up the front steps of the villa. The guard had a meaty hand on the child's shoulder, more to support than restrain at this point. As soon as the door swung open, Dante saw the boy clearly for the first time, without the greenish tint of night vision. The child was indeed small, maybe 7 years old, with a pale face, smudged with dirt and big dark eyes that were filled with equal parts fear and determination. His cheeks glistened where a few tears had escaped and carved paths through the grime. He wore a thin, threadbare hoodie despite the chill of the winter night and clutched something in his tiny fist. It looked like a crumpled piece of paper. Those wide eyes locked onto Dante. For a second, Dante wondered what the boy saw. He knew his own appearance was intimidating to most. tall and broad-shouldered, his arms marked with tattoos that hinted at violence, sharp gray eyes that seldom showed mercy. Dante expected the child to shrink back, maybe reconsider whatever mission had driven him here. Instead, the boy stepped forward out of Marco's hold. His lower lip trembled, but he lifted his chin with a kind of defiant courage. "Sir," the child said in a shaky but loud voice, "please, I need your help." The words tumbled out, accented with the local Neapolitan dialect. "My mom disappeared after her blind date." Dante's breath caught in his throat. Of all the things he had anticipated, a lost child, an extortion attempt, some strange prank, this plea was not one of them. The boy's voice cracked on the last word, and Dante noticed how the kid clenched his fist to stop them from shaking. "Come inside," Dante said quietly, stepping aside to usher the boy in. He shot a quick glance at Marco, silently signaling him to stand down but stay alert. The guard nodded and retreated to the perimeter, understanding that the boss wanted privacy, but might call if needed. The boy hesitated on the threshold, suddenly wary now that he was face to face with the notorious Mafia boss in the dimly lit foyer. Dante could see him struggling, with the instinct to run, versus the desperate need that had compelled him here. "It's okay," Dante said, softening his tone. He crouched down slowly, making sure to keep some distance so as not to spook the kid. At this level, the boy's ragged breathing and trembling became even more apparent. Dark circles stained the skin beneath those young eyes. The kid looked utterly exhausted. "You said your mother disappeared?" Dante prompted gently. "Start from the beginning. What's your name, ragazzo?" The child swallowed hard. "Nico," he managed. Up close, Dante could see Nico's eyes were a deep brown, round and glistening with tears that hadn't yet fallen. "My name is Nico Bianchi." Dante nodded encouragingly. "Okay. Nico, I'm Dante." He omitted his last name, Costa, since everyone in Naples knew it, and it often instilled fear. Right now, the boy needed reassurance, not more fear. "Tell me what happened to your mother." Nico bit his lip. He opened his hand, revealing the crumpled piece of paper Dante had glimpsed. It was actually a small photograph, creased and smudged. The boy held it out with shaking fingers. Dante took it gingerly, holding it under the hallway light. It showed a smiling young woman with kind eyes and dark hair, her arm wrapped lovingly around a grinning Nico who looked a couple of years younger in the photo. The mother's face was striking. Dante felt a strange jolt of recognition, but he couldn't immediately place why. "She's my mama," Nico said in a small voice, reverence and fear mingling. "Her name is Sophia. She went on a blind date 2 days ago, and she never came home." His voice faltered at the end, and Dante could see him fighting not to cry. Dante's jaw tightened. 2 days missing. A beautiful woman vanishing after a date. In his line of work, he could immediately think of a dozen horrific possibilities, from human trafficking to a serial predator. The thought made his blood run cold, but he forced his expression to remain steady for the boy's sake. "Have you told the police?" Dante asked. His voice remained calm and even, though inside his mind was already racing through the implications. Nico nodded, a flash of frustration crossing his face. "I tried. I went yesterday, but they didn't really listen." His small hands balled into fists again, knuckles white. "They said maybe she just ran off with the guy, or that maybe she needed a break and would come back." His voice turned bitter as he recounted the police's dismissive attitude. "They didn't believe me. I know my mama. She would never leave me. Something bad happened. I know it." A tear finally escaped and rolled down Nico's cheek, but he angrily wiped it away. Dante felt a surge of anger on the boy's behalf. It was just like the authorities to ignore a desperate child, especially if the missing person was a single mother. Dante knew the police would assume she might have left on her own, a corridor that she was just another adult in a city full of daily dramas. They wouldn't mobilize quickly for a missing woman, not unless there was clear evidence of foul play. "I believe you," Dante said firmly. The relief in Nico's eyes was immediate, though his tears still glistened. Dante placed a careful hand on the boy's shoulder. He felt the little body trembling beneath his palm, and realized with a start how bony. Nico felt even through the hoodie. "When was the last time you ate something?" Nico opened his mouth as if to answer, but nothing came out. He frowned, clearly trying to remember. I'm not sure. Maybe yesterday morning, or the day before?" A spike of concern shot through Dante. The kid hadn't eaten in possibly 2 days. Dante stood at once, gently guiding the boy further into the house. "You need food," he said, leaving no room for argument. We'll talk in the kitchen. Nico didn't protest. His eyes widened as he took in the grand foyer of the villa. Marble floors, high ceilings, a grand staircase curving up to the second floor. Under different circumstances, any child might be awed to wander such a place. But right now, Nico was running on fumes and worry. His steps were unsteady, and Dante realized the boy was literally starving and exhausted. Dante led Nico to the kitchen. The house was mostly dark and silent at this hour, but he flicked on the warm lights of the kitchen, which was modern and gleaming. Nico hovered by the door, unsure if he was allowed inside such a pristine space. "Sit," Dante said, pointing to one of the stools at the kitchen island. Nico obeyed, climbing up onto the stool. He swayed slightly once perched, as though the effort of climbing had taken more out of him than it should. Dante quickly opened the fridge. As a man living alone, he usually had a chef come during the daytime or went out to eat, but he always kept some basics. He grabbed a bottle of water and a plate of leftover pasta from dinner. After a moment's thought, he also fetched some bread and cheese. He shouldn't give a starving child heavy food too. Fast. Better to start with something light. He placed the water in front of Nico. "Drink slowly," he instructed. Nico's grubby hands fumbled with the cap. Dante reached over and twisted it open for him. The boy murmured, "Grazie," and gulped greedily. Then remembered Dante's instruction and forced himself to slow down. Taking measured sips, Dante heated the pasta in a pan quietly. The only sounds were the faint sizzle from the stove and the ticking of a clock on the wall. He could sense Nico's eyes following his every move, still wary but hopeful. In those few minutes, Dante's mind churned. He recalled the photograph. Sophia. He rolled the name on his tongue silently. The face had stirred something in him. Had he seen her before? Possibly around the neighborhood? She looked to be in her late 20s, maybe, with gentle eyes. He felt a protective instinct rising, similar to what he felt whenever he saw innocent people in trouble on his turf. Dante might have been a criminal in the eyes of society, but he had his own code. He hated those who preyed on the weak, especially women and children. If someone had taken this woman, Dante would move heaven and earth to bring her back, and make the perpetrator pay dearly. He slid the warm plate of pasta in front of Nico and offered him a slice of rustic bread. "Eat," he said. Nico didn't need to be told twice. He dug in with a ravenous energy, trying to be polite but failing as he slurped spaghetti with shaky hands. Dante almost smiled but held it back, not wanting to embarrass the kid. Instead, he gently prompted, "Feel better?" Nico nodded quickly, swallowing. "Yes, sir. Thank you." He slowed down a little, as if suddenly conscious of his manners. "I'm sorry, I was so hungry." "It's all right," Dante said quietly. "Just eat. There's more if you want." They stayed silent for a while as Nico ate. Color gradually returned to the boy's cheeks. Dante leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching with a thoughtful expression. He was still trying to puzzle out that sense of familiarity. As Nico ate, Dante decided to ask more questions gently. "You said your mother went on a blind date," Dante began. "Did she tell you anything about the man? Or where they were going?" Nico nodded, wiping his mouth on the back of his sleeve. "She said it was a restaurant in the city center, La Trattoria del Sole, and the man's name was Paolo, I think. It was supposed to be just dinner. She said she'd be back by my bedtime." His voice trembled again at that, the hurt of being left alone for 2 days seeping into his words. "But she didn't come back, and I waited all night. I tried calling her phone, but she didn't answer." Dante's eyes darkened. He knew that restaurant, a cozy local spot. If someone snatched her from there, someone must have seen or heard something. Unless the man lured her out with some excuse. "When she didn't come back that night, what did you do, Nico?" Dante asked softly. I was scared," Nico admitted, looking down at his plate. "I thought maybe she got stuck somewhere or her phone died. But the whole next day she still didn't come. I kept hoping she'd walk through the door. I was afraid to leave the apartment, in case she came home and I wasn't there. I didn't know what to do." His voice fell to a whisper at the last sentence. Dante could hear the loneliness and fear that must have filled those hours. For the child, Nico sniffed and continued. "By the next evening, I was really worried. I remembered where she said she was going, so I went to the restaurant myself. The owner knows my mom. She sometimes works there part-time in the kitchen when she's not teaching. He said Mama had been there that night for her date, but she left with the man around 9. The owner thought she left willingly like it was fine, but she never came home. Nico's hand gripped the fork so tightly, Dante thought it might snap. I asked if anyone saw which way they went, but no one really noticed. One waiter said the man seemed upset when they left, like he was talking angrily, but they didn't think it was anything bad at the time. Dante's frown deepened. A public restaurant was a relatively safe place. Likely nothing happened there. But if the man was angry and she left with him, either he convinced her to go somewhere and then turned on her, or he forced her out once they were away from witnesses. You did good investigating, Dante assured the boy. It was impressive that Nico had the courage to go around asking adults for information on his own. What did you do then? Nico sighed, stirring the remaining pasta absently. I went to the police after that. I was so afraid, and I didn't know who else to ask. But like I said, they didn't help. They took a report, but I could tell they didn't believe me. One officer even said maybe Mama found a new boyfriend, and forgot to tell me. His face twisted, in anger and disgust. My mama would never do that. We only have each other. She wouldn't just leave me. A fierce protectiveness welled up in Dante. He believed the boy. He'd seen that kind of single-minded devotion on a mother's face before. Hell, he'd seen it on Sophia's face in that photo as she held her son. That was not the face of a woman who'd abandon her child. I'm sure she wouldn't, Dante said, his voice coming out more tenderly than he intended. He cleared his throat and added, the police are often useless in these situations. They have to wait 48 hours for a missing person. He almost spat the phrase he to be considered in trouble. By then it can be too late. He didn't sugarcoat it. Kids often appreciate honesty, and he already sensed Nico was a tough kid. Nico looked up at Dante with a steady gaze. That's why I came here, he said quietly. Dante raised an eyebrow. Why me, Nico? Do you know who I am? The boy nodded slowly. Mama always said, she said Signor Dante runs the city, that nothing happens in Naples without you knowing. Nico looked down, a little embarrassed. And I remember you from that day at the market. Dante's heart gave a strange lurch. The market? Yes, he had seen her before. The memory flooded back a few months ago. He had been walking through an open-air market, keeping a low profile, just enjoying a stroll among normal people, when he'd intervened in a scuffle. Some low-life peddler had been harassing a young woman who refused to buy something. He'd gotten physical, grabbing her wrist, making a scene. Dante had stepped in, teaching the scum a lesson with a few choice words and a twisted arm. He remembered now. That woman he saved was not Sophia, but right after that, he'd noticed another woman nearby with a child. She was comforting the frightened child who'd been startled by the commotion. Dante had looked over and locked eyes with the mother, just for a moment. Her face had struck him then, beautiful and grateful as she mouthed thank you to him from a distance, thinking he'd simply done a good deed. Dante had given a polite nod and moved on, but he hadn't forgotten her. Could it be? Dante's pulse ticked up. The mother with the child at the market. Was that Sophia and Nico? It must have been. No wonder her face in the photo stirred his memory. He had seen her that day, and perhaps once or twice around town afterward, though always from afar. He had found himself occasionally checking the small marketplace on Via Roma. After that, hoping for another glimpse, though he never approached her. At the time, he'd chided himself for being foolish. What was he going to do? Introduce himself as a Mafia boss to a gentle schoolteacher? No, he had kept his distance, simply making sure that any time he was in that neighborhood, his men kept an extra eye out so that no thugs or troublemakers ever bothered the vendors or shoppers again. Perhaps subconsciously it had been for her, for Sophia. Nico continued talking, pulling Dante from his reverie. You stopped those men from hurting that lady at the market. I saw you make them go away and leave everyone alone. And then I heard some people say afterward that you were the one who keeps the peace in our neighborhood. Mama told me not to talk about it, but I know you're kind of like a king here. A king who can make bad people pay. The boy's voice was matter-of-fact, with an almost admiring undertone. Dante felt a wry smile tug at his lips. King, huh? He'd been called many things in his life. Boss, criminal, devil. But hearing it from this innocent boy's perspective was unexpectedly touching. He knelt down so he was eye-level with Nico, who was still perched on the stool. You think I can help you? Dante said. Not as a question, but as a realization. Nico nodded, a tear finally spilling over despite his brave face. I didn't know who else to go to. Everyone else, they don't care. But you," his voice wobbled, "you help people in our neighborhood, even if they don't know it's you. Mama said we shouldn't ever bother you, but she's never been gone this long. I'm so scared something happened. She's all I have. Please, Signor Dante, you're my only hope." Dante closed his eyes for a moment. The last time someone had looked at him with such trust and pleading, it had been his own son, begging him to come play, or his wife needing him home safe. Memories he'd buried deep threatened to surface, but he steeled himself. This was not about his past. This was about a child in front of him right now who needed him. He opened his eyes and placed a hand on Nico's shoulder again, gently this time. "You did the right thing coming. Here." There was a resolve in Dante's voice that made Nico's eyes light, up with a flicker of hope. "I will find your mother, Nico. I promise you." Nico's breath hitched. For the first time, his tough facade cracked completely. The little boy launched himself forward off the stool and into Dante's chest, wrapping his arms around Dante's neck in a fierce, desperate hug. Dante froze for a half second, shock, and an onslaught of emotion rooting him to the spot. Slowly, he brought his arms around the trembling child, steadying him. "It's okay," Dante murmured awkwardly, feeling Nico's hot tears soak through his thin t-shirt. The boy was quietly sobbing now, the exhaustion and fear of the last 2 days finally given an outlet. Dante gently rubbed Nico's back, trying to recall how he used to comfort his own son after a nightmare. "I'll take care of it. You're not alone anymore." Nico clung tighter, tiny fists gripping the back of Dante's shirt as if afraid the man might vanish like his mother had. "Thank you," the boy choked out between sobs. "Thank you." In that moment, Dante Costa, one of the most feared men in Italy, felt something unexpected break open in his heart. He had locked away his softer feelings after his family's tragedy, encasing himself in ice and ruthlessness. But this fragile child's trust and heartbreak were cutting through those defenses with alarming ease. Holding Nico, Dante silently swore to himself that he would return Sofia to this boy safe and sound, no matter what it took. Whoever had dared harm, Nico's mother would learn what it meant to cross a man like Dante. After a few minutes, Nico's sobs subsided. The boy pulled back, suddenly self-conscious about the outburst. He scrubbed at his face. "Sorry," he mumbled, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "There's nothing to apologize for," Dante said gently. He rose, lifting Nico in his arms without really thinking about it. The boy was light as a feather, too light. It made Dante want to track down Nico's deadbeat father and make him pay for abandoning them. But that was a thought for another time. Nico stiffened in surprise when Dante picked him up, but then settled in his arms, clearly too drained to object. Dante carried him through the hallway. "Let's get you cleaned up and rested. Tomorrow, we start looking for your mama." Nico's head drooped against Dante's shoulder, the adrenaline that had fueled him this long finally wearing off now that he felt safe. "Okay," he murmured, already half asleep. Dante took him to a guest bedroom on the ground floor. It was a simple but comfortable room, mostly unused. He flicked on the lamp. Soft light revealed a neatly made bed. With one hand, Dante pulled back the covers and gently set Nico down. The boy immediately curled up on his side, eyes barely open. Dante took off the boy's worn-out sneakers. One sock had a hole at the toe. The sight tugged at Dante again, making him wonder just how hard Sofia had been struggling, raising her son alone on a teacher's meager salary. As Dante drew the blanket up over Nico, the boy's eyes fluttered. "You won't leave me, will you?" Nico whispered, a hand reaching out to grasp Dante's forearm weakly. Dante sank to sit on the edge of the bed. He met Nico's gaze directly. "I'm right here. No one's going to hurt you. You can sleep, Nico." Nico's fingers relaxed slightly, still resting on Dante's forearm. Will you really find her?" he asked, voice tiny and already slurring with impending sleep. "I will," Dante promised again, gravely. "I never break my promises." Nico managed a tiny nod. Satisfied with that answer, his eyes finally closed, exhaustion overtaking him at last. Within moments, the boy was asleep, his small hand still loosely holding onto Dante's arm. Dante sat there a while, making sure Nico was fully asleep. The child's breathing evened out, though now and then a little hiccup from crying would shudder through him. Dante waited until Nico's hand slipped off and the boy rolled onto his stomach, hugging the pillow instead. Quietly, Dante stood and watched the sleeping child. He ran a hand through his own dark hair, exhaling slowly. A storm of emotions brewed inside him. Anger at whoever caused this, concern for the woman he barely knew yet felt drawn to, and an undeniable warmth for the brave little boy who had marched to a Mafia boss's home in the middle of the night to save his mother. Under different circumstances, Dante might have smiled at the absurdity of it, but there was nothing amusing about a missing mother. Dante turned off the lamp, leaving the door ajar a crack so Nico wouldn't wake in total darkness. As he stepped out into the hallway, Dante caught Marco, the guard, hovering discreetly at a distance, watching for any signal from his boss. Dante walked over and spoke in a low voice so as not to disturb the boy. "Marco, I want 2 men on this wing through the night," Dante ordered. Discreetly. "The kid is sleeping in the guest room here. I don't want any disturbances, and I want him safe at all costs." "Understood? Yes, boss," Marco replied quietly, eyes flicking to the slightly open door. A hint of confusion crossed his face. No doubt he was curious why a child was here, but he was smart enough not to ask questions. "I'll explain later. For now, just ensure he's protected." Dante's tone made it clear there would be hell to pay if anything happened to Nico under their watch. Marco nodded firmly and moved off to arrange the watch. With that settled, Dante made his way to his study down the hall. He shut the door behind him and immediately pulled out his cell phone. It was nearly 2 a.m, but he had no qualms about waking people at this hour. First, he dialed one of his captains, Lorenzo, a man who oversaw many of Dante's operations around the city. The phone barely rang once before a groggy voice answered. "Boss?" "Lorenzo, ascolta," Dante said, not wasting time. "I need you to gather a few of our guys first thing in the morning. We have a situation. A woman's gone missing, abducted, possibly 2 nights ago after leaving La Trattoria del Sole. Her name is Sofia Bianchi. Find out everything you can, who she was with, where they went. I want information by tomorrow afternoon at the latest." Lorenzo was awake now. Dante could practically hear him sitting up and grabbing a notepad. "Understood, boss. Sofia Bianchi, missing from Trattoria del Sole 2 nights ago. Any description of the man she was with?" "First name Paolo, that's all I have so far. But check if the restaurant has any security cameras, or if she parked her car there, and see if anyone noted a license plate. Also, ask around discreetly. If someone took her, they might try to move her out of the city quickly. Check the usual pipelines. Traffickers, known creeps, any whispers." "Of a woman grabbed recently," Lorenzo cursed under his breath. He, like Dante, had a low tolerance for crimes against women. "We'll find them. Boss, I'll update you as soon as I have something." "Make it fast. Lorenzo." Dante paused, then added in a deadly soft voice, "If you catch wind of someone connected to this, tell our boys to keep them breathing. I want the pleasure of tearing them apart. Personally." There was a brief silence on the line. "Capisco," Lorenzo acknowledged. He understood well the level of wrath Dante was hinting at. "I'll be in touch soon." Dante hung up. He pinched the bridge of his nose, forcing himself to think logically through his rage. Snapping and wanting blood was his knee-jerk reaction whenever. Innocents were hurt on his turf, but he needed clarity now more than fury. He sank into the leather chair at his desk. The study was dim, the only light coming from the desk lamp he switched on, illuminating a framed photograph that stood there. Dante's chest tightened as his eyes fell upon it. The frame held a picture of a bright-eyed little boy with a gap-toothed grin, sitting on the shoulders of a laughing woman with sunlit golden hair. Dante in the photo was off to the side, arm around his wife's waist as they posed as a happy family on the beach. Gently, Dante picked up the frame, his wife Elena and his son, Marco. It had been 5 years since the car bomb that stole them away. 5 years since Dante had allowed himself to feel anything but vengeance and duty. After they were gone, he had channeled all his pain into expanding his empire, crushing his enemies, and ensuring no one would ever catch him off guard or take what mattered to him again. He set the frame face down on the desk, unable to look into those joyful faces any longer. Yet tonight a little boy's desperate hug had stirred emotions in Dante that he thought he had buried forever. In Nico's eyes, he had seen the reflection of his own son, innocence threatened by cruelty, and a hope that Dante could save the day. The weight of that trust was heavy, but strangely, it gave Dante a renewed sense of purpose beyond his own grievances. He spent the next hour making more calls. He pulled every string he could, some contacts in the police to at least get an official alert out on Sofia Bianchi, a couple of street informants to start sniffing around for any unusual chatter. The underworld of Naples was a complex web, but Dante had connections everywhere. If someone moved a kidnapped woman through his city, he would hear about it one way or another. By 3:30 a.m., there was nothing more to do until his people reported back. Dante left the study and quietly checked on Nico one more time. The boy was fast asleep, breathing evenly. Dante noticed he was still clutching that photograph of his mother in one hand, even in sleep. Dante gently eased the picture from Nico's fingers to avoid it getting crumpled further, and placed it on the nightstand. Then Dante settled into a chair in the corner of the guest room. He tried to rest, but found himself unable to fully sleep. Instead, he kept a silent vigil over the child, the promise he'd made echoing in his head like a vow etched in stone. He would find Sofia, and God help the man who dared to take her. Early morning light filtered through the curtains when Dante heard a soft shuffling behind him. He had dozed off at some point in the armchair in Nico's room, one hand still resting on the arm of the chair near the bed. Now he rubbed his eyes and saw Nico sitting up in bed, blinking sleepily. For a brief moment, the boy looked confused, as if unsure of where he was. Then memory flooded his face. His eyes went wide with panic. "Mama!" Nico gasped, throwing the covers off and scrambling out of bed. Dante quickly stood and caught the boy by the shoulders before Nico could bolt. "Easy, easy," he said gently. "You're safe here, Nico, remember? You came to me last night." Nico stilled, recognition calming him slightly. His gaze darted around the unfamiliar room, then back to Dante. The morning sun lit up Dante's face, and something about Dante's presence seemed to steady the boy. Nico's voice was small and fearful. "I thought it was a nightmare, that she was gone." He looked down, shoulders slumping when he realized it. Wasn't a bad dream. His mother truly was missing. Dante knelt so he was eye level with Nico. "I meant what I said last night. I have my best people looking for her right now. We will find her." Nico searched Dante's face, perhaps looking for any hint of doubt, but Dante's expression was firm. After a moment, Nico nodded slowly. "Thank you," he whispered, remembering how he had broken down and Dante had comforted him. He wiped at his eyes, then glanced at the half-open door behind Dante. I should go home. Maybe Mama came." "No," Dante interrupted softly but firmly. "Not until we know she's safe. You're staying with me where I can keep you safe." Too, he realized he hadn't fully considered that aspect. If someone had taken Sofia, could the same person threaten Nico? It was unlikely the kidnapper cared about the boy or even knew of him. But Dante wasn't about to take any chances. Nico hesitated. "But what if Mama comes home and I'm not there?" Dante had anticipated the boy's worry. "I've already thought of that. I'll have one of my men go watch your apartment. If your mother shows up or anyone comes looking, we'll know immediately. I don't want you going back there alone right now." Nico bit his lip, then relented. Maybe part of him didn't want to return to an empty home anyway. "Okay, good. Now, how about we get you cleaned up and find you some breakfast?" Dante said, trying to sound upbeat for the boy's sake. Only now did Dante notice Nico's appearance in the daylight. The kid's clothes were even dirtier and more rumpled than they had seemed last night, and there was a fading bruise on his left knee, likely from stumbling during his long walk through the city. Dante felt another wave of anger at the situation. This child had practically been through hell the past 2 days. Nico followed Dante through the hallway, glancing around wide-eyed at the luxurious decor that he hadn't noticed in the dark the night before. The villa's interior was elegant but not gaudy. Tasteful art on the walls, expensive rugs on the floors, everything impeccably clean. It probably felt like a palace compared to Nico's modest apartment. Dante led him to a bathroom. "There's a shower if you want to freshen up, or I can run a bath if you prefer." Nico shook his head quickly, eyes widening at the idea of using such an opulent bathroom. I'm okay, sir. I can just wash my face, maybe." Dante gave a gentle smile. "All right. Face washing is fine. There's a new toothbrush in the cabinet, too." While Nico awkwardly stood on tiptoes to splash water on his face, Dante stepped out and made a quick call to one of his men, instructing them to station near Sofia's apartment discreetly and to alert him if she or anyone suspicious came by. The chances were slim, but Dante wanted every base covered. He then fetched some clothes for Nico. Dante didn't exactly have children's clothes lying around, but he found a small t-shirt and a pair of drawstring sweatpants that belonged to his late son. Dante hesitated when he pulled them. From a storage box in his bedroom closet, the shirt was a faded blue with a cartoon astronaut on it, and the pants were soft gray, one knee patched from where his son had torn it playing. Dante's chest constricted at the sight of the little clothes, the memories threatening to surge. But he steadied himself. This wasn't the time to crumble. Returning to the bathroom, he found Nico drying his face on a towel. The boy's hair was damp where he had run wet fingers through it. Dante held out the clothes. "These might fit you better than what you have on." "They were my son's." His voice grew quieter at the last part. Nico looked at the offering, then up at Dante, understanding the significance. "Your son?" he echoed softly. Dante nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "He's not here anymore, but I think he'd like it if someone could use his things." There was a pause. Nico accepted the clothes gingerly. "Thank you. I'll take good care of them." Dante managed a tight smile and stepped out to give Nico privacy to change. As he leaned against the wall in the hallway, he closed his eyes briefly. Memories he typically kept locked away threatened to push. Through memories of a lively 6-year-old, racing through these halls, of laughter and little feet pattering on these floors. Dante took a slow breath. Focus. He needed to stay focused on the present. When Nico emerged, the clothes were a bit loose, but not excessively so. The boy had rolled up the pant legs a little to keep from tripping. He offered a tentative smile. "They fit okay." "They look good," Dante nodded. Seeing Nico in his son's clothes hit him with an unexpected pang of emotion, but it also felt right in a strange way, as if some part of his son's memory lived on by helping this child. In the kitchen, Dante set about making breakfast. Usually his morning routine was a quick espresso and maybe a cornetto pastry dropped off by his housekeeper, but today he decided to prepare something himself. He found eggs and started making a simple omelet. Nico hovered nearby, clearly feeling out of place in the grand kitchen. "You can sit," Dante said, motioning to the same stool as last night. Nico hopped up, watching with curiosity. "You're cooking? But you're a Mafia boss?" Dante finished wryly, cracking an egg into a bowl. "Even Mafia bosses can cook a little. I'm not completely helpless." Nico blushed. I didn't expect someone like you to take care of me." Dante paused mid-whisk and turned to the boy. "Someone like me?" Nico fidgeted. "Mama said you're an important man, that we shouldn't bother you because you have important things to do. And I've heard people say you're dangerous." Dante resumed whisking eggs, thinking of how to respond. He opted for honesty. "I am dangerous to people who deserve it. I do bad things sometimes, Nico, but I never hurt good people. I protect this neighborhood, this city, in my own way. Sometimes the law isn't enough, so someone like me has to step in." Nico absorbed that quietly. "So, you're a good guy who does bad things to bad people?" The simple yet astute observation made Dante let out a short chuckle. "Something like that." He poured the eggs into a pan. The omelet sizzled as he added cheese and herbs. "Your mama, she's a teacher, yes?" he asked over his shoulder, recalling Nico mentioning that. "Yeah," Nico said, brightening just a little at the chance to talk about her. "She teaches literature at the local primary school, and sometimes she works at the restaurant on weekends to earn extra money. She likes books a lot. She reads to me every night. Well, she used to." His voice faltered, thinking of the lost routine. "What's your favorite story she reads to you?" Dante asked gently, flipping the omelet onto a plate. Nico thought for a moment. "Pinocchio," he said. "Mama does funny voices for all the characters. She always says Papa was like Pinocchio because he told lies. But he never learned to be good like the real Pinocchio did. I think that story makes her a little sad. But she still reads it to me because I love the adventures." Dante set the omelet and some buttered toast in front of Nico. He had caught the bitterness when Nico mentioned his father. "You mentioned last night that your father left you both," Dante asked carefully. The boy nodded, poking at the eggs. "He left when I was 4. He fell in love with someone else, and he just left us. Mama tried to hide how sad she was, but I knew." Nico looked up, a fierceness in his young eyes. "She's the best mom. She didn't deserve that. She works so hard for us, and she's always been there for me. I hate him for what he did." Dante's hand unconsciously curled into a fist on the counter. He had seen plenty of men abandon their families. It never failed to disgust him. His own father had been cold and cruel, and Dante had sworn to never be that way if he had children, and he hadn't until fate took his family away. If he walked through that door right now, I'd give him a piece of my mind, Nico added, surprising Dante with the venom in his voice. Or maybe let you give him a punch, he said, with a shy glance at Dante's muscular arms, as if recognizing he himself was too small. Despite the grim topic, Dante almost smiled. I think he deserves more than one punch, Nico managed a tiny grin at that and took a bite of omelet. His face lit up with appreciation. This is really good. I'm glad you like it, Dante said. Pleased to see. Nico ate with more enthusiasm now that he was rested and less stressed for the moment. As Nico ate, Dante's phone buzzed on the counter. He saw a text from Lorenzo. Got a lead. The guy's full name is Paolo Romano. Checking his address now. We'll call soon. Dante's pulse ticked up. A lead already. The wheels were in motion. Thank God Lorenzo was efficient. He typed back a quick acknowledgement. Is it news about Mama? Nico asked quietly, noticing Dante's expression as he looked at the phone. Dante put the phone down. He didn't want to get the boy's hopes too high too soon. My man found out the name of the man she had dinner with. Nico swallowed his mouthful quickly. Really? Paolo? Something, right? So he's real? Not a fake name? Paolo Romano, Dante confirmed. Do you know him? Had your mom met him before? Nico shook his head. No, it was a blind date. Mama doesn't really date much. But her friend from school set this up. Her friend said Paolo was a cousin of someone. She knew and that he was a nice guy. He made a face. Some nice guy. Dante nodded grimly. Sometimes friends don't truly know people either. Do you know the friend's name? The one who set her up? Aunt Chiara. Well, she's not really my aunt, but Mama's friend. Miss Chiara. She teaches at the school, too. That could be another angle to check. Maybe the friend had more information on Paolo. Dante filed that away for later. For now, Lorenzo's team was already on it. As if on cue, Dante's phone started ringing. The screen showed Lorenzo's name. Dante answered with a curt, "Talk to me." Lorenzo's voice came through, brisk and businesslike. "Boss, we got an address on Paolo Romano. Lives alone, mid-30s, small-time financial consultant. No criminal record that stands out. Just a few bar fights maybe. But here's the thing, you're gonna love this. Turns out a woman filed a police report against him about a year ago for harassment. She eventually dropped it, but it's on file." Harassment? Dante's grip on the phone tightened. He kept his face neutral so as not to alarm Nico, who was watching him intently. Ex-girlfriend, Lorenzo explained. Claimed he stalked her after she tried to break up. Showed up at her work, made threats. She dropped the charges when he backed off. But maybe our boy Paolo here has some issues with rejection. Dante's eyes narrowed. That fit the picture forming in his mind. Sophia likely sensed something off about him and tried to cut the date short. And he might have lost his temper. Did you find out where he might have taken her? Dante asked. Not yet. We went by his apartment. No one answered. We're keeping a watch on it. But his car is gone too. A black Fiat sedan. Plate number we got from a traffic cam near the restaurant that night. We tracked the car heading north out of the city. About an hour after they left the restaurant. North, out of Naples, Dante muttered. That route could lead to a number of places. Smaller towns, rural areas, or it could curve toward the coast. Did you get an exact direction or final sighting? The traffic cam caught him on the highway E45 heading toward a caserta around 10:30 p.m. that night, Lorenzo said. After that, nothing yet. We're scanning other cams and asking around. Caserta was a smaller city not far away, but beyond that lay more remote areas. If he took her out of Naples, he might have a hideout or something prearranged. This was feeling less like a spur-of-the-moment crime and more like something planned, a predator who knew what he wanted to do. Also, Lorenzo added grimly, one of our snitches in the area mentioned hearing about a guy asking around a week ago for some help with a new girl he was seeing, like looking for someone to maybe teach her a lesson. If she didn't play nice, the idiot might have been planning something if she rejected him. It's not solid, but if it's him, he might have had a spot prepared. Dante's blood boiled at the thought of that slimy coward planning to hurt Sophia simply because she rejected him. Keep on it. I want his location pinned down as soon as possible. I'll join you for the visit once you find him. Understood. Boss. Dante ended the call and noticed his hand was shaking slightly with contained rage. He took a deep breath to steady himself. Nico, who had been pretending not to eavesdrop but clearly catching some bits, asked timidly, "Did they find something bad?" Dante didn't want to scare the boy, but he also didn't believe in lying to him. "It sounds like the man your mother met might have gotten angry with her. We think he took her somewhere outside the city, but we're getting closer to finding out exactly where." Nico paled, his small hands clenching on the edge of the counter. "We have to hurry," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "What if he hurts her or worse?" "We will hurry," Dante assured. He walked around the counter and placed his hands on Nico's shoulders gently. "My men are doing everything they can right now. I promise you, I won't let anything happen to her. You have to trust me, okay?" The boy looked down, his eyelashes wet. "I do trust you. It's just, I'm really scared for her." Dante felt an overwhelming urge to pull the kid into another hug, seeing him try so hard to hold in his fear. So he did. He wrapped one strong arm around Nico's thin shoulders and pulled him against his side. "I know," he said quietly. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going even if you are. And you, Nico, are very brave." Nico sniffed and leaned into Dante. Only for a few seconds. Then he straightened, embarrassed by his own vulnerability. He wiped his face quickly and nodded. "What do we do now? Can I help?" Dante admired the boy's spirit, but there wasn't much a child could do in a manhunt. Still, keeping him occupied was important. "For now, you stay with me. If I need to go out, I'll have someone trustworthy look after you. Maybe later we can visit someone who might know more, okay? You can help me ask questions." Nico agreed eagerly, clearly wanting to be useful. Dante decided they both needed some fresh air to clear their heads while waiting for more information. "Come, let's go to the garden for a while." The villa had a high-walled garden out back, a safe place for Nico to get some sun without leaving the secure compound. It was a crisp morning, the sky a clear blue. Dante led Nico along stone paths between manicured hedges and a small fountain. Normally, Dante hardly noticed the tranquility of his own garden, but seeing Nico marvel at the rose bushes and a stone statue of St. Francis under an olive tree made him appreciate it anew. Nico walked alongside Dante, the boy's hand occasionally brushing against Dante's as if seeking reassurance that the tall man was still beside him. Dante slowed his usual brisk pace to match the child's shorter strides. At one point, Nico stopped by the fountain and peered at the water, which reflected their forms. "My mama would like this garden," he said softly. "She loves plants. We have a little balcony and she grows basil and rosemary. And some flowers." Dante watched the sunlight catch the warm brown of Nico's eyes. In that moment, he imagined Sophia in this garden as well, perhaps smiling as her son showed her around. A quiet domestic vision that felt jarringly pleasant in contrast to Dante's normal life of deals and violence. "She's welcome to visit at any time," Dante said. Then he added quietly, "Once we bring her home." Nico looked up at him and managed a hopeful smile. "When we bring her home." Dante gently placed a hand on the boy's head, a gesture that felt natural. He realized he was growing attached to Nico at an alarming pace. But who wouldn't? The kid had spirit, intelligence, and a heart as big as any Dante had seen. He deserved a safe and happy life with his mother. The sound of Dante's phone ringing again broke the moment. Dante answered at once when he saw Lorenzo's number. This time Lorenzo had an address. "Old canned goods factory outside Caserta," Lorenzo reported, a slight breathlessness to his voice like he might be in a vehicle as they spoke. "The car was spotted by a local who owes us a favor. It's parked inside an old warehouse on the property. There have been off and on rumors of some sketchy activity there, but nothing concrete till now. We're heading there, but I held off going in until you say the word." "You did good," Dante said, adrenaline starting to course through him. "I'm on my way. Don't go in until I arrive. If Paolo's got her and possibly others, we need to plan a careful approach." "Roger that. We've got a team of 4 here already, watching all exits." "I'll bring a couple more with me," Dante said. "And Lorenzo, make sure no one spooks him into doing something rash. We want her alive." "Understood." "Boss?" When Dante hung up, his face was hard with resolve. Nico was watching him, tense. "They found where she is," Dante told him, deciding to share the truth. "We think she's being held in an old factory outside the city. I'm going there now to bring her back." Nico's eyes widened with relief and new fear. "I want to come," he blurted out. Dante immediately shook his head. No, absolutely not. It's too dangerous. These people might have weapons. The boy looked ready to protest, but Dante knelt and put both hands on Nico's arms firmly. Listen to me. The best way you can help your mom is by staying safe. If I'm worrying about you, I can't focus on getting her out. You understand? Tears of frustration brimmed in Nico's eyes, but he understood. Slowly he nodded, though it was clear how badly he wanted to do something. Dante continued, I'm going to leave you with someone I trust while I go handle this. I will bring her back, Nico. You have my word. Nico sniffled, then surprised Dante by flinging his arms around Dante's neck again. Please bring her back, he whispered. Dante hugged him back briefly. I will. He gently pried the boy off and stood, taking out his phone to make another call. He phoned Angelo, one of his most trusted lieutenants, who also happened to have a kind way with kids. Angelo had 3 of his own. Dante instructed Angelo to come to the villa immediately to watch over Nico until he returned. Within 10 minutes, Angelo arrived, a bald, middle-aged man with a burly build but a gentle smile. He greeted Nico kindly while Dante pulled him aside and gave quick, firm instructions. Nico was to be kept inside and safe at all times. If Dante didn't return by nightfall or if something went wrong, Angelo was to take Nico and hide him someplace secure. Angelo understood. Though Dante didn't voice the worst scenario, Angelo knew Dante was saying that if Dante fell in this fight, the boy still needed protection. Nico stood by the doorway, wringing his small hands as Dante prepared to leave. Dante crouched to meet his eyes one last time. I'll be back with your mom. I promise. Nico nodded, desperately holding on to faith. Dante reached into his jacket, pocket, and pulled out a cell phone, one he'd pre-programmed, with his own number and Angelo's. It was a simple phone, easy for a kid to use. He pressed it into Nico's hand. This is for you. If you hear anything or need anything, you call me or Angelo, all right? I'll call you as soon as we have your mother safe. Nico clutched the phone. Be careful, Dante. Hearing his name from the boy was a bit of a surprise. It was the first time Nico hadn't called him Sir or Signor Dante. It felt nice, like a real bond had formed. Dante mustered a reassuring smile. I will. And hey, when we come back, maybe we'll all have dinner together. I bet your mama would like that. A flicker of a smile touched Nico's lips at the thought of them all together safe. I'd like that too. With that gentle promise hanging in the air, Dante rose and strode out. As he left, he heard Nico call softly behind him. Please bring my mom home, Dante. The quiet, pleading words were the last thing he heard before the door closed, and they fueled the fire in Dante's veins. He got into his black Maserati, 3 of his best soldiers already inside waiting, 1 in the passenger seat, 2 in a trailing SUV. Dante normally wouldn't bring so many to handle a single man, but they didn't know what they'd find at that factory. If there were multiple thugs or victims involved, he needed manpower. Tires screeched as they sped out of the estate. Dante's jaw was set, and his eyes burned with a singular focus. He had given his word to Nico, and to himself. Now it was time to fulfill it. Sophia was waiting, and God help anyone who stood in Dante's way. The abandoned factory loomed at the end of a dusty road, a hulking skeleton of concrete and rusted metal under the midday sun. Dante's Maserati and the trailing SUV screeched to a halt behind a stand of overgrown bushes, out of sight. He stepped out, the dry grass crunching under his boots, and immediately surveyed the area. Lorenzo emerged from the shadows of a crumbling side building and jogged over to meet him, 2 other men trailing behind. Dante was all business now, every sense on high alert. What's the situation? He asked in a low voice. Lorenzo pointed to a large warehouse structure attached to the main factory floor. Cars inside there. We counted at least 2 armed men patrolling. Likely more inside. No sign of the target or the women from outside. But the place has a basement level according to old blueprints. Maybe where they're keeping them. Dante's eyes narrowed. So Paolo wasn't acting entirely alone. He had at least a couple of thugs helping him. Perhaps those he'd sought out for help, as Lorenzo had mentioned. That complicated things slightly, but nothing Dante and his men couldn't handle. Dante quickly formulated a plan. Okay, we go in quiet. Marco and Vito, he nodded to 2 of his men, circle around back and take out any lookouts silently. Lorenzo, you and Sergio are with me at the front. Suppressors on if you have them. We breach in 2 minutes. His men nodded, faces grim and determined. Guns were checked, suppressors screwed on the barrels with soft clicks. Dante pulled out his own handgun, attaching a suppressor from his jacket pocket. They moved swiftly and silently. Marco and Vito melted into the shrubbery, disappearing toward the rear of the warehouse. Dante, Lorenzo, and Sergio crept along the front wall, pressing against graffiti-stained concrete. The front-loading door of the warehouse was partially open, enough for a person to slip under. Dante peered through the gap. Inside, the cavernous warehouse was dim, lit only by high windows and a few hanging work lamps that cast long shadows. Dust motes swirled in the stale air. In the center, Paolo's black Fiat was parked, confirming they had the right place. A thug with a rifle slung on his shoulder paced near the car, looking bored. Another was by a door that likely led further inside, possibly to that basement or offices. Suddenly, a muffled clatter echoed from the back of the building. Perhaps Marco or Vito neutralizing someone near the rear exit. The guard by the car stiffened and took a step in that direction, his attention momentarily diverted. Dante seized the moment. With a swift gesture, he and his 2 men slipped under the door and moved like shadows along the perimeter of the interior. Dante closed the distance to the distracted guard near the car in seconds. The man turned just in time for Dante to slam the butt of his pistol into his temple. The guard crumpled without a sound. At the same time, Lorenzo and Sergio took aim at the second thug by the door. Pfft! The sound of 2 silenced shots was barely louder than a whisper. The thug collapsed, a dark bloom spreading on his chest. Dante signaled forward, and they converged on the door the second guard had been watching. It was an old metal door, slightly ajar. Voices could be heard beyond it, muffled crying and a man's harsh bark. Dante's heart thumped. Sophia. She had to be in there. He eased the door open. Beyond was a stairwell leading down, lit by a single bulb. The cries grew louder, echoing off the concrete. Dante descended first, gun raised. Lorenzo and Sergio followed close. At the bottom of the stairs was a hallway. The scene that met Dante's eyes made his blood boil. A makeshift holding area had been set up in what looked like an old storage basement. The space was lit by a few work lights and lanterns. Against one wall, cowering and bound, were 4 women. They looked terrified, tear-streaked and disheveled. One was sobbing softly. Another was trying to comfort her, despite her own shaking. In front of them stood a thin, nervous-looking man holding a pistol, likely another hired thug. And a bit further away was Paolo. Dante recognized him from the description Lorenzo had given. Mid-30s, average build, with a neat beard and expensive-looking suit now rumpled. He was pacing, running a hand through his hair in agitation. "I told you to shut up!" Paolo snapped at the women, his voice high-strung. He looked unhinged, sweat beading on his forehead. Dante's eyes flicked to the hostages. 3 of the women seemed unfamiliar, but the 4th, Sophia. Dante saw her at once. She was at the end of the line, her hands tied in front of her, rope looping also around her ankles. Her dark hair was messy, her lips split, and there was a bruise on her cheek, but she was alive. Dante's heart pounded with relief and fury at seeing her hurt. She looked pale, but her eyes were furious, not broken. Even bound on the floor, she was glaring up at Paolo with hatred. "Paolo, please," Sophia tried to reason in a hoarse voice, though one could hear her strain to stay calm. "Let these other women go. They have nothing to do with this." "You don't have to—" "Shut up, Sophia!" Paolo shouted, whirling on her. "This is your fault. If you had just behaved, just listened to me, none of this would have happened." He gestured wildly with a gun in his hand. He too was armed, a small handgun, which he pointed toward Sophia. She flinched but held her chin up. The sight of Paolo threatening Sophia made Dante grip his pistol so tightly his knuckles went white. He advanced quietly, Lorenzo and Sergio fanning out to cover other angles. The nervous thug hadn't noticed them yet, his attention also on Paolo's tirade. Paolo was raving now. "You think you can reject me? Embarrass me at the restaurant, huh? Acting like you're too good for me." He was breathing heavily, eyes wild. "I was doing you a favor, you stupid woman. Who else would want a used-up thing like you with a brat in tow? I was willing to overlook that." Dante felt a red haze of anger. How dare he speak of her and Nico that way? Sophia spat at Paolo's feet, surprising Dante with her boldness. Her voice trembled but was laced with venom. "I would rather die than be with a man like you. You're sick, Paolo. Kidnapping women, hurting them. You'll rot in prison for this." Paolo's face twisted and he stepped toward her menacingly. "Rot in prison? No, darling, I don't think so. You see, men like me, we can do whatever we want. I have friends, I have money, and women like you are just toys to be played with. Until we're bored. Dante had heard enough. As Paolo loomed over Sofia, raising his hand as if to strike her, Dante stepped out of the shadows. His voice cut through the space like a dagger. Touch her and that will be the last thing you ever do. Everyone froze. Paolo spun around, shock and confusion in his eyes at the sight of Dante and his gun, leveled steadily at him. The thin thug near the hostages yelped in surprise and fumbled for his own weapon. But a swift, suppressed shot from Lorenzo took him down cleanly. He slumped to the floor with a thud, causing the women to cry out in fright. Who the hell? Paolo blustered, his gun hand wavering as he tried to assess this new threat. Dante stepped closer, calm death in his eyes. Dante Costa, Nico's friend. He almost said Nico's father, in the heat of the moment, but caught himself. Let me give you some free advice, Paolo, Dante said with icy softness. Insulting a woman and threatening her child is a very quick way to sign your own death warrant. Paolo's face went from confused to a flicker of recognition to fear. Perhaps he had heard the name Dante Costa in hushed whispers around Naples. His bravado faltered for a moment. Behind him, Sofia's eyes widened as she finally processed who had come. Dante? She breathed in disbelief, hope and relief flashing across her face, but Paolo was desperate. He quickly moved behind Sofia, grabbing her roughly. He yanked her up and clutched her to his chest, pressing his gun to her temple. Sofia gasped, her bound feet struggling to keep balance as Paolo used her as a human shield. Back off, Paolo shouted, panic creeping into his voice. I'll shoot her, I swear. Don't think I won't. Dante halted, gun still trained on Paolo but frustration flaring in his chest. One wrong move and Paolo might hurt her. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Lorenzo and Sergio position themselves subtly apart, trying to find a clear shot, but Paolo was smart enough to keep Sofia directly between him and Dante's men. You're making a big mistake, Dante said evenly, eyes locked on Paolo's. If you harm her, there's nowhere on earth you can hide from me. Paolo laughed hysterically. The sound unhinged. You think I'm scared of you? You're just some thug. I'm already screwed, aren't I? You think I don't know that? His temple glistened with sweat. Dante could see the man's finger twitching near the trigger, a dangerously nervous, unstable man. For a split second, Dante's eyes met Sofia's. She was breathing fast, fear evident, but she also seemed to gather something in that moment. Perhaps courage, perhaps resolve. It happened in an instant. Sofia suddenly drove her elbow back into Paolo's ribs with all her might. It wasn't a powerful blow given her condition, but it was unexpected. Paolo grunted in pain and surprise, his grip loosening just enough. Dante didn't hesitate. Bang! A single gunshot roared in the enclosed space, deafening without the suppressor. Dante had taken the shot. His bullet struck Paolo's shoulder, making the man howl and drop the gun as his arm went limp. In fury and pain, Paolo shoved Sofia away and lunged for his dropped pistol with his other hand. But Dante was quicker. He sprinted forward, kicking the weapon across the floor. Far out of Paolo's reach, the two men collided, Dante slamming Paolo against the wall. Dante's forearm pressed hard against Paolo's throat as the man struggled. You're done, Dante hissed at Paolo, who clawed uselessly at Dante's arm, eyes bulging. Paolo wheezed, face turning red. You can't kill me, he choked out. If you do, you're no better than Dante's patience snapped. He grabbed Paolo by the collar and threw him down onto the concrete floor. Paolo coughed, scrambling backwards on his elbows, fear now fully consuming his features as he looked up at Dante towering over him like an avenging angel. You thought you could lay a hand on her and live. Dante's voice was deadly quiet. He kicked Paolo hard in the stomach. The man yelped, curling up. You made a mistake. A big one. Paolo's eyes darted around, looking for help. But all his accomplices were neutralized. Lorenzo and Sergio had secured the remaining area and were untying the other women. The women, now freed, huddled together, gazing at Dante with a mix of awe and terror as he dealt with their tormentor. Dante grabbed Paolo by the scruff and dragged him upright. The man whimpered. The gunshot wound in his shoulder, rendering one arm useless. Please. Paolo blathered, blood oozing between his fingers where he clutched his shoulder. Please don't kill me. I can pay. Dante's lip curled in disgust. Your money's worthless. He drove Paolo back, into a pillar and pressed his gun, under the man's chin. Give me one good reason. I shouldn't end you right now. Sophia's voice cut through the rage fogging Dante's mind. Dante. She spoke his name firmly, though her voice was strained. Don't kill him. Dante glanced toward her. Sophia had gotten to her feet, having been untied by Lorenzo moments before. She was a bit unsteady, but she was upright, her hands free now though raw from ropes. Her dark eyes stared at Dante with something pleading. He deserves it, Dante growled, not loosening his hold on the trembling Paolo. The thought of letting this man live after what he had done was unthinkable to Dante in that moment. Maybe he does, Sophia said, taking a step forward. She winced. Her ankle might have been twisted when she was shoved aside, but she limped toward Dante anyway. But not like this. Not in front of them. She tilted her head slightly toward the other women, who were watching with wide, frightened eyes. Dante realized what she meant. These women had been through enough horror. Seeing a man executed in front of them might scar them further. And perhaps beneath that, Sophia didn't want blood on Dante's hands in her presence. Dante took a breath, wrestling his fury back under control. He gave Paolo a contemptuous sneer and cracked him hard across the jaw with the pistol's grip instead of pulling the trigger. Paolo's eyes rolled back and he slumped unconscious to the ground. Tie him up, Dante ordered Sergio, who immediately moved to secure Paolo with the same ropes used on the women. Dante stepped away from the crumpled kidnapper, turning toward Sophia. For a moment, Dante and Sophia simply looked at each other. In her eyes, Dante saw recognition, relief, and a wave of emotion that mirrored his own. He couldn't quite find his voice. The surge of gratitude that she was alive and relatively unharmed nearly took his breath away. Sophia moved first. She closed the distance between them and threw her arms around Dante's neck, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in the world. Dante tensed in surprise, then immediately enveloped her in his strong arms, one hand cradling the back of her head. He felt her trembling against him. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. Dante, thank you. I knew Nico would find help. I prayed it would be you. Her words made something tighten in Dante's throat. He held her a fraction closer. I promised Nico I would bring you back, he said quietly into her hair. He's a brave kid. He loves you so much, Sophia. Sophia let out a soft sob at hearing that and pulled back just enough to look up at Dante. You found him? Nico, is he okay? Yes, he's safe at my home. He's been waiting for you. Dante gently brushed a stray tear from her cheek with his thumb, his touch lingering perhaps longer than strictly necessary. He never gave up. He came to me for help. Smart boy. Sophia managed a watery smile, eyes shining. He is smart. Too smart sometimes, she swallowed. I can't believe he actually went to you. I was so worried he'd be all alone. He was alone, Dante said softly, anger creeping back into his voice at the thought. He waited for you for 2 days on his own. When he realized you weren't coming home, he was desperate. The police ignored him. Dante's jaw clenched. It shouldn't have come to that. Sophia closed her eyes, a tear escaping down her face. My poor baby. He must have been so scared. She opened her eyes again, fresh determination in them. I need to see him. I need to know he's okay with my own eyes. You will, Dante assured her. He glanced around. Lorenzo was leading the other women out of the basement, supporting those who were weak, guiding them gently up the stairs. They'd be taken care of. Dante had already texted one of his men to call a trusted medical team to meet them. Those women would get home, or wherever they needed, safely now. Sergio dragged the unconscious Paolo along like a sack of garbage. Boss, what do you want done with this piece of filth? He asked. Dante looked at Paolo with cold eyes. There were 1,000 things he wanted to do. But feeling Sophia's hand still resting lightly on his arm, he made a decision. Turn him over to the authorities, Dante said, quietly. Sergio raised an eyebrow in surprise. Normally, the boss handled such matters internally, but he understood this was a special case. We'll make sure he and his buddies are found at the scene, tied up with plenty of evidence of what they did. Good. Dante's lips curled in a cruel approximation of a smile. And let it slip to some of our friends in prison exactly what he did to those women. I'm sure he'll receive a warm welcome behind bars. Sergio gave a chuckle. Understood. With that, Dante turned back to Sophia. Her legs looked unsteady, and for the first time he realized the extent of her condition. She was running on adrenaline. He noticed she had no shoes, Her feet were dirty and one ankle swollen. Without another word, Dante scooped her into his arms. Sophia let out a soft gasp of surprise. "Dante, I can walk. Let me," he said more gruffly than he intended. "Please." He didn't want her collapsing on the way out or injuring that ankle further, and a part of him just needed to hold her, to feel for himself that she was safe now. Sophia acquiesced, wrapping an arm around his shoulder and resting her head against him. Dante carried her up the stairs, careful to shield her from brushing against the rough walls. As they emerged into the sunlight outside the warehouse, Sophia squinted at the brightness. The SUV was brought around, and Dante gently set Sophia down by the open door. He removed his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. When he noticed she was shivering, despite the warm day, it was likely shock setting in. She pulled it around herself gratefully. Before helping her into the car, Dante took out his phone. He remembered his promise to Nico. Finding Sophia was only part of it. The boy needed to hear her voice. He dialed the number of the phone he had given Nico. It rang only once before a small voice answered. Breathless. "Dante? Did you find her, Mama?" Dante felt Sophia's hand grip his arm when she heard Nico's voice faintly through the phone. He smiled at her. "Nico, I've got someone here who wants to talk to you." He handed the phone to Sophia. Her hands trembled as she brought it to her ear. "Nico, sweetheart?" Mama, is that you?" Nico's voice burst out, cracking with emotion. "It's me, my love," Sophia said, tears streaming freely down her face now. "I'm okay." On the other end, Nico started sobbing in sheer relief. "Mama, I was so scared. I thought—" "I know, baby, I know," Sophia choked up. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. But Dante brought me back. I'm safe now, and I'll be with you soon, I promise. Please come soon, Mama," Nico cried. "I'm waiting. I'm on my way," she soothed. "I love you so much, Nico." "I love you too, Mama, so much." There was a pause. Then a shy, earnest, "Tell Dante thank you, and I love him too." Sophia glanced at Dante, her eyes widening slightly at Nico's words. Dante felt his heart constrict. He turned away for a second, pretending to check on the loading of the other women into another vehicle to regain his composure. Sophia whispered into the phone, "I will. We both will. Together." She listened a moment more to Nico's voice, then said, "See you very soon, honey. I need to go now so I can come to you, okay?" They exchanged goodbyes, and Sophia handed the phone back to Dante, tears still glistening in her eyes but a radiant smile on her face now. "He sounds okay," she said softly, voice filled with gratitude. "Because of you," Dante shook his head. "Because he's a remarkable kid who refused to give up. I just did what he asked me to." Sophia reached out and took Dante's hand, squeezing it. "You did so much more than that. I heard what happened, how you took him in, fed him, comforted him. You saved me. Dante, I can never repay you for that." Dante looked down at their hands, then back into her eyes. "You don't owe me anything. I'm just sorry it took me 2 days to get to you." She lifted his hand to her lips suddenly and pressed a gentle kiss to the back of it. The gesture was intimate and full of unspoken emotion. Dante's breath caught. Her warmth on his skin, the softness of that kiss, it all sent a jolt through him. "You kept your promise to Nico," Sophia murmured. "That's everything." For a long moment they gazed at each other. Dante felt a nearly overwhelming urge to lean in and kiss her properly. Her bravery, her love for her son, her resilience, everything about this woman drew him in like a magnet. He realized it wasn't just Nico who had grown attached. Dante himself had fallen far harder and faster than he ever expected. But he held himself back. This wasn't the time, and maybe not his right. She had just endured trauma, she was vulnerable, and he was what he was, a Mafia don soaked in blood and danger. Did he have any right to even think of bringing someone like her and her child into his life permanently? Dante cleared his throat gently and helped Sophia into the back seat of the SUV. "Let's get you home." He sat beside her for the journey back, unable to resist keeping her hand in his. She didn't object. In fact, she leaned against his shoulder, eyes closed as exhaustion overcame her. As they drove away from that dreadful place, sirens could be heard in the distance, undoubtedly called in anonymously, to collect the trash Dante left behind. But in the vehicle, there was silence except for Sophia's soft breathing and the hum of the engine. Dante allowed himself a brief moment to close his eyes and savor The relief of success. Sofia was safe. Nico would have his mother back in his arms soon. Yet even in this moment of triumph, Dante couldn't shake the subtle ache forming in his chest. The way Nico's voice had called him family, Dad, over the phone, and the way Sofia clung to him now, it felt so right. And that terrified Dante more than any gunfight, because it made him want things he had sworn never to want again. When Dante's SUV pulled through the gates of his estate, it was nearly evening. The sun hung low, casting golden light over the villa's gardens. Before the car even rolled to a complete stop, the front door of the house flew open. Nico burst out and sprinted down the steps towards the driveway, Angelo following close behind to make sure he didn't trip. The boy's face was a mixture of overwhelming anticipation and anxiety, eyes red like he'd been crying and refusing to move from the door since the call. Dante stepped out first and barely had time to open the back door for Sofia before Nico barreled into him. "Dante!" Nico gasped, clutching Dante's legs briefly, then wriggling past to see inside the car. "Mama?" Sofia swung her legs out and emerged, still draped in Dante's jacket, looking tired and battered but very much alive. The instant Nico saw her, he let out a wail of pure relief. "Mama!" Sofia dropped to her knees on the gravel drive, opening her arms. Nico collided with her, nearly knocking her backward, as he wrapped himself around her in a fierce hug. "Mama, mama, mama," he cried into her shoulder, sobbing openly now. Sofia was crying too, holding him as if she'd never let go. "I'm here, baby. I'm here," she whispered, smoothing his hair, kissing the top of his head again and again. "My sweet boy, I'm so sorry. I'm here now." Dante stepped back a pace, giving them room. Angelo quietly ushered the other men away as well, directing them to carry out tasks elsewhere. Sensing this reunion was a private moment, Dante watched mother and son cling to each other and felt a lump in his throat. This was what he had fought for, the pure, unbreakable bond of family reuniting. It was beautiful and heartbreaking all at once, stirring memories he usually kept buried. After a long moment, Nico pulled back just enough to look at Sofia's face. He sniffled, reaching a small hand to touch her bruise gently. "He hurt you," Nico said, voice shaking with anger and guilt. "I'm sorry, Mama. I should have—" "No, Nico. None of that," Sofia said firmly, wiping his tears with her thumbs. "You have nothing to be sorry for. You saved me, do you hear? You did everything right, my love. You were so brave." She gave a watery laugh. "My little superhero." Nico managed a slight smile at that through his tears, and hugged her again fiercely. Dante felt a delicate hand slip into his own. He looked down to see Sofia reaching for him, pulling him closer. He allowed her to draw him into the embrace. Nico released one arm from his mother and flung it around Dante too, pulling him in so that the three of them were locked in a tight circle. "Thank you, Dante," Nico mumbled from where his face was pressed against Sofia's shoulder, his other arm gripping Dante's waist. "Thank you for bringing my mom back." Sofia nodded in agreement, her cheek resting against Dante's chest now as she held both her son and the man who saved them. "Thank you," she echoed softly, looking up at Dante with eyes shining with gratitude and something more, something like affection. Dante's throat worked. He raised a hand and placed it gently on Nico's head and his other hand lightly on Sofia's back. He wanted to freeze this moment in time, the warmth of two people holding on to him not out of fear or obligation, but out of love and relief. He closed his eyes, just for a second, letting himself feel it fully. It had been so long since he'd felt like part of a family. The sensation was almost too much to bear, a joy so sharp it cut. Eventually they all pulled back slightly. Sofia cupped Dante's face impulsively, a bold gesture that surprised him. She looked at him as if searching for something. "You're hurt," she murmured. Her thumb brushed near his temple. Dante had forgotten about it in the adrenaline. Paolo had managed to land a glancing blow on his cheek at some point. It was just a bruise, a minor cut. "It's nothing," he said, but Sofia's brows knitted. She fussed over him, gently wiping a bit of dried blood he hadn't realized was on his jaw. "He must have fought you." Dante shrugged, trying to downplay it. "I've had worse." Nico frowned up at him too. "You got hurt for us." "It's really nothing, Nico," Dante insisted softly. Sofia sighed, her hand lingering against Dante's cheek. He found himself leaning subtly into her touch. She realized and slowly let her fingers slip away, a slight blush on her cheeks despite everything. "Let's go inside," Dante said, clearing his throat. Both of you need rest and probably some medical attention. I have a doctor I trust on the way to check on you, Sophia, and to make sure Nico's all right too." Sophia nodded appreciatively. Standing, she winced as pain shot through her ankle from bearing weight. In a flash, Dante scooped her into his arms again, not caring about formalities. "Oh," Sophia gasped softly. Then she chuckled, looping her arms around his neck. "I suppose I should get used to you carrying me." Nico hovered at Dante's side, looking concerned for his mom. Dante gave the boy a reassuring nod. "Your mom will be fine. She just shouldn't walk right now. I've got her." As Dante carried Sophia into the villa, Nico held onto Dante's sleeve, walking in step with him as if afraid to let either of them out of his sight. Inside, Dante settled Sophia gently on a plush sofa in the living room. Nico climbed up beside her, holding her hand tightly. Before long, the doctor arrived, an older man who had been on Dante's payroll for discreet needs. He examined Sophia's bruises and ankle, a mild sprain, cleaned the small cuts, and pronounced that with rest and care she'd be fine. He offered some painkillers, which Sophia accepted gratefully. Nico refused to leave his mother's side throughout, and Dante stood sentinel nearby, arms folded as he watched with concern. After the doctor left, Angelo quietly informed Dante that everything had been handled. Paolo and his goons were found by the police. The other women were safe and being aided, and the media had caught wind of a trafficking ring bust, thanks to some strategic anonymous tips. Dante nodded, satisfied that Paolo's crimes would see daylight and the women would get help without his own name surfacing. Sophia insisted she was all right to stand and wanted to freshen up. So, Dante guided her and Nico to the guest room suite, the same one Nico had slept in. He left them in privacy to shower and change, providing Sophia with some of his comfortable clothes since hers were torn and dirty. During that time, Dante found himself pacing the living room, mind restless. Now that the immediate crisis was over, reality crept in. What was he going to do next? Part of him yearned to invite them both to stay here indefinitely, to protect and care for them. But his rational side, and the dark fear rooted in his past trauma, warned against it. By the time Sophia emerged, dressed in one of Dante's crisp white shirts and drawstring pants, which were comically large, but she had rolled the sleeves and cuffs, Dante had steeled himself. Nico was right beside her, now also changed back into the spare clothes Dante had given him earlier. They looked like they belonged here. Sophia in his clothes, and Nico clearly comfortable now in the space. The sight struck Dante in the chest. They looked like a family waiting on the man of the house. "My family," a treacherous thought whispered in Dante's mind. Sophia offered a smile. Her face was clean, her hair damp and combed back. Even with the bruises, she had a gentle beauty that made Dante's heart ache. "We should probably get out of your hair," she said softly. "You've done more than enough for us." Nico's face fell at that. "Do we have to go, Mama? Can't we stay a little longer? Just tonight?" He looked between her and Dante pleadingly, clearly not ready to part ways with Dante. Dante found himself wanting to say yes before Sophia even answered, but he waited. Sophia bit her lip. I don't want to impose," she said, though her eyes showed she too wasn't eager to leave the safety of Dante's home so soon. "You're not imposing," Dante said quickly. "Please stay as long as you need. My home is yours." The words left his mouth before he could second-guess them, and he meant it. Relief and gratitude washed over Sophia's features. "Thank you," she said, and there was a warmth in her gaze that made Dante's pulse quicken. Nico whooped, and to Dante's amusement, the boy did a little jump of joy. "I get to stay in the big house!" For the first time in what felt like ages, Dante genuinely laughed. It was a deep, warm sound that momentarily dispelled all the dark thoughts in his mind. He reached out and ruffled Nico's hair. "Just for tonight." He caught Sophia watching them, a tender expression on her face. Their eyes met, and an understanding seemed to pass between them. Perhaps they both realized how natural this was starting to feel, and how dangerous that was for Dante's heart. That evening, Dante's staff prepared a simple but hearty meal, soup and fresh bread for Sophia's sake, and plenty of pasta for Nico, who had regained a healthy appetite. They ate together at Dante's dining table, an experience that was surreal for him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd shared a meal at his table with anyone, let alone a lively child and a woman who made him feel things he thought had died in him. They talked quietly as they ate, Sophia recounted more of what happened during the date. How Paolo had seemed nice at first but grew angry when she turned down a second drink and mentioned she wanted to get home to her son. How he'd coerced her into his car by pretending he left something in it to give her, and then pulled a knife once she was nearby. Her voice shook, and Dante had to grip his fork tightly to contain his renewed rage. But Nico held her hand supportively, and Dante forced himself to relax for her sake. Sophia glossed over the worst of her captivity, just saying he kept them in a room and she tried to keep the other women's spirits up, all the while praying for a way out. Dante could tell she was sparing Nico details. He was both impressed and heartbroken by her strength. She had clearly tried to protect those women even when she was a victim herself. When the conversation grew heavy, Nico inadvertently lightened it by asking Dante questions about his house and his cars. "Do you really have a red Ferrari?" "Angelo said you did," which made Dante smirk and admit yes. Locked away in the garage, and with a child's innocence. "Are you really the boss of everyone, Dante?" Sophia started to chide him softly. "Nico, that's not polite." But Dante waved it off with a small smile. "It's all right, honestly. Yes, Nico, in this city, I suppose I am the boss of a lot of people." "Like a king," Nico said, echoing his earlier sentiment. "But you're a good king. You saved Mama." Sophia looked at Dante thoughtfully. "He is a good man," she agreed quietly, causing Dante to duck his head for a moment, unaccustomed to such open praise. After dinner, Nico's eyelids were already drooping, exhaustion catching up to the little boy. Sophia herself looked like she was fighting to stay awake, fatigue and the painkillers making her blink slowly. Dante suggested they all get some rest. "My home is well guarded. You're safe here," he assured them. He guided them back to the guest room, where he helped Sophia settle into the bed. Nico stubbornly refused to go to a different room. He crawled into the bed beside his mother, clinging to her arm. Dante smiled at the sight. Sophia touched Dante's hand as he tucked the blankets around them. "Will you stay?" she asked softly. "At least until we fall asleep." It was an innocent request, spoken with vulnerability. Dante hesitated. She looked so small and fragile lying there. Nico curled up at her side. How could he refuse? "Of course," he said, his voice gentle. He sat in the armchair by the bed, the same, one in which he'd kept vigil the night before over Nico. Sophia kept her hand, loosely around his fingers, as if she needed the connection to feel safe. Dante was keenly aware of her touch, the softness of her palm, the subtle way her thumb lightly caressed his knuckles absent-mindedly. It made his heart ache in a sweet way. In a few minutes, Nico was asleep, exhaustion trumping even his excitement at having his mother back. His little snores were soft and steady. Sophia fought sleep a bit longer, her eyes on Dante. "Dante," she whispered in the dim light. "I didn't properly thank you. You've thanked me plenty," he whispered back. "No, not just for saving me." She bit her lip, searching for words. "For caring for my son, for being there when he needed someone. You kept him safe and you gave him hope. I can never repay that." Dante shook his head, and on an impulse he brought her hand up to his lips, returning the kiss she had given his hand earlier. Sophia's breath caught as he brushed a tender kiss on her knuckles. "Seeing you two together, like this is all the thanks I'll ever need." Her eyes glistened in the low light. For a moment Dante thought she might say something else, something that perhaps would open the doors to feelings that were hovering, unspoken between them. But instead, she simply held his gaze and whispered, "We won't ever forget what you've done." With that, her weariness finally overtook her. Her eyes closed, and she drifted to sleep, her hand still resting in Dante's. Dante sat there for a long while after both mother and child were peacefully asleep. He watched the rise and fall of their breaths, his heart full yet heavy at the same time. They looked so right together, and if he were to be honest, he looked right there with them. He allowed himself, just for tonight, to imagine what it would be like if this were his life. Coming home to a loving wife and a cheerful son, sharing dinners, easing nightmares, being needed and loved openly. The fantasy was painfully sweet. In the silence, Dante admitted something he had been denying all day. He had fallen in love with Sophia, maybe not the kind of love that comes with months or years of courtship, but a profound connection and admiration. And Nico, Dante loved that boy as if he were his own blood. There was no use pretending otherwise to himself, but love was dangerous in his world. Loving his wife and child once gave his enemies power over him, and fate had taken them away. Could he risk that again? He gazed at Sophia's peaceful face, and Nico's small form curled against her. He knew what he had to do, as much as it tore at him. Dante rose quietly, gently slipping his hand free from Sophia's so as not to wake her. He pressed a light, feather-soft kiss to Nico's dark hair, and then one to Sophia's forehead, letting his lips linger a second as he memorized the feel of her warm skin. "I'll always watch over you," he whispered, so faintly that the words drifted away without disturbing their sleep. Then he left the room, pulling the door closed softly behind him. Morning light had just begun to filter in when Sophia awoke to the sound of birds chirping outside the window. She found herself alone in the bed except for Nico, who was still snuggled under her arm, deeply asleep. Startled, she sat up, looking around. There was no sign of Dante in the chair. Carefully, so as not to wake Nico, Sophia got up. Her body ached, but the few hours of sleep had done wonders. She found her own clothes from the day before, laundered and neatly folded on a dresser. Dante must have had someone clean them overnight. After changing, she stepped out into the corridor. The house was quiet. "Dante?" she called softly. Angelo appeared seemingly out of nowhere, giving her a polite nod. "Good morning, signora. Dante." "Ah, Dante left early." Sophia's heart skipped. "Left?" Angelo smiled kindly. "He had some urgent business out of the city, but he asked me to give you something." He handed her a small envelope. Inside, Sophia found a note written in strong, neat handwriting. "Sophia, I am truly sorry I could not say goodbye in person. Something urgent needed my attention. Please know that you and Nico are safe. Angelo will drive you home whenever you are, ready, and ensure you have everything you need. You both have my number. If you ever need anything at all, I will be there, no matter what. Do not hesitate. It was an honor to know you and your son. Take care of each other. Dante." By the time Sophia finished reading, her vision blurred with tears. He was gone just like that? She felt an acute pang of loss. After everything they had been through, he slipped away, leaving behind a polite, distant note. Angelo seemed to understand her emotions. He spoke gently, the boss. He does that sometimes, when things get too personal. Sophia wiped her eyes, taking a shaky breath. Dante was pulling away to protect himself, or perhaps to protect them. She recalled the way he'd looked at them last night, the war in his eyes between longing and fear. Angelo added quietly, "He cares about you and the boy. A lot. That's why he left like this. He thinks staying will put you in danger." Sophia gave a small, sad nod. She appreciated Angelo's honesty. It confirmed what she suspected. Dante was afraid of what he was feeling, afraid his world would eventually hurt them. Nico's sleepy voice came from the doorway of the guest room. "Mama, where's Dante?" He rubbed his eyes, looking around in confusion. Sophia opened her arms and Nico shuffled to her, still groggy. She hugged him tightly. "He had to go, sweetie. He left us a nice note." Her voice wavered despite her attempt to sound reassuring. Nico looked crushed. "He left, but he promised he'd come for dinner and stuff." His eyes welled up. Sophia's heart broke at her son's disappointment. She crouched down to meet Nico's eyes. He didn't want to leave Nico. But his work, his life, it's complicated. He wanted to keep us safe. Nico sniffled, his little hands balling into fists. "I wanted him to be with us, like a dad." Sophia stroked his hair. "I know, baby. I know." She held him for a moment, letting him be upset. "But he did say we can call him anytime. And he promised that if we ever need him, he'll be there." Nico pulled back and asked with childlike directness, "Do you think he needs us, Mama?" The question caught Sophia off guard. She glanced at Angelo, who was pretending not to listen, but definitely was, judging by the soft sigh he let out. She thought about Dante's lonely figure in that big house, the way he had watched them with such yearning, and how alive he seemed when he was with them. Did Dante need them? She felt in her heart that he did. Perhaps more than he realized. "I think maybe he does," she answered softly. "But sometimes grown-ups have a hard time admitting they need someone, especially if they're used to being alone." Nico wiped his nose on his sleeve. "Maybe we can help him not be alone one day." Sophia's eyes filled, with tears again, but she smiled. "Maybe, yes." She kissed Nico's forehead. "Right now we should go home, okay? I'm sure you'd like to see our apartment again." and I need to let everyone know we're all right." Reluctantly, Nico nodded. Angelo saw them to Dante's sleek, black car which had been brought around to drive them. As he opened the door for Sophia, he handed her one more thing, a slender cell phone. "From Dante," he explained. "So he's just one call away." Sophia accepted it, her fingers closing around the phone with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. She and Nico settled into the car, and Angelo started the drive to their home. Nico kept twisting around in his seat to gaze back at the villa until it disappeared from view, as if hoping Dante might reappear at the last second. But the road behind was empty, except for the receding grandeur of the Costa estate. Sophia held Nico's hand, offering comfort as best she could while her own heart felt newly hollow. As they neared their neighborhood, Nico suddenly said, "He promised he'll come if we need him. Do you think we'll ever need him, Mama?" Sophia looked at the boy's earnest, forlorn face and then down at the phone in her lap. "I think we might," she said softly. Then she added with quiet determination, "And not just when we need help. Maybe one day, when he needs us to need him." Nico frowned, trying to puzzle that out, but then he nodded as if deciding to trust his mother's intuition. The car pulled up to their apartment building. Neighbors and friends, having heard of Sophia's safe return, were beginning to gather with relief and joy, ready to welcome them back. Chiara, the friend who had set up the blind date, was there in tears, apologizing profusely. Sophia hugged her, forgiving. There was no point in holding anger. Paolo alone bore that blame. In the flurry, Nico stayed close to Sophia. Yet, as everyone ushered them inside to fuss over them, he looked back one more time to the car that had delivered them. It was empty now. Angelo had stepped out to politely hold off the curious well-wishers. Nico's eyes searched, perhaps half expecting Dante to be in the car. But of course he wasn't. Nico reached into his pocket and touched the simple phone Dante had given him. It was a tangible reminder that Dante was out there, thinking of them. That night, after the excitement died down, and Sophia and Nico were finally alone in their little apartment, Sophia tucked Nico into his own bed. She sat on the edge, stroking his hair. "Try to sleep, sweetheart." Nico clutched a small stuffed lion, one Dante had bought him earlier that day while they were walking in the garden. Dante had jokingly said it was a fierce guardian to watch over him at night. Nico held it tight now. "Mama, do you miss him?" Sophia felt tears prick again. She had been holding them in all day, but with her son, honesty felt right. "Yes, I do." "Me too," Nico whispered. "It hurts." Sophia climbed into the bed and hugged Nico close. "I know, it hurts me too. But do you remember what Dante told us? We're not alone. We have each other, and he's out there for us if we really need him." Nico nodded against her. After a few moments, he asked, "Do you think he's okay? Who takes care of him when he's sad?" Sophia's throat tightened. She remembered Angelo's words. He does that when things get too personal. And Dante's own confession about losing his family. He had so much pain hidden behind that strong exterior. Who was comforting him tonight? "I'm sure he's okay," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. "He's very strong, but everyone needs someone, even if they won't admit it." Nico pulled back to look at her with a determined little face. "If he ever comes back, I'm going to call him Dad for real. Because he basically is. He protected us like a dad is supposed to." Tears finally spilled from Sophia's eyes then. She kissed Nico's forehead. "I think he would like that, Tesoro," she whispered. "But even if he can't be here, we know he cares for us, right?" "Right," Nico murmured, settling down at last. "He's like our guardian. Like my lion." He held up the stuffed lion and managed a tiny smile. Sophia stayed with him until he drifted to sleep, exhausted by the day's events and emotions. Then she stepped out onto the small balcony of their apartment, the same balcony where Dante's unseen protection had perhaps kept trouble away in the past. The night air was cool, the city sounds distant. She looked at the stars beginning to twinkle and allowed herself to finally cry, freely, tears of relief, tears of heartbreak, tears of hope. She didn't know if fate would ever bring Dante back into their lives fully, but she knew one thing. A bond had formed that would not easily break. Dante was out there, and he cared. In her hand, she held the new phone he'd provided. It was a lifeline of sorts. After a long moment, Sophia inhaled deeply and wiped her tears. She made a silent vow under that Italian sky. She would build her life back for Nico's sake, but she would also not shy away if destiny offered her another chance. with the man who had saved them. Perhaps one day, Dante would overcome his fears and let himself be part of their family. Perhaps one day, he would realize that in protecting them, he'd saved himself too. Until then, they would live, and he would remain a promise on the horizon, a promise sealed with the words he left them. If you ever need me, I will be there. And Sophia believed him with all her heart. In a world full of uncertainty, Dante's promise was as solid as the stars above, a quiet beacon that gave her strength. Far across town, Dante sat in the back of his car, his driver navigating the quiet streets. He too looked up at the emerging stars. He wondered if Sophia and Nico were looking at them now. His chest ached with longing, but also a strange peace. They were safe. That was what mattered. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph, the one he had taken, from Nico's hand that first night. The photo of Sophia and Nico smiling together in happier times. Dante ran a thumb over Sophia's face in the picture, then over Nico's goofy grin. Someday, he thought. Someday, perhaps he could earn a place in that picture with them. For now, he slipped the photo back into his pocket, close to his heart, and gazed out at the night. He allowed himself a small, hopeful smile as his car merged into the dark, knowing that this was not an end, but merely an open-ended pause in a story that was far from over.